The Pittsburgh Steelers had their head coach Mike Tomlin talking on Tuesday about the offensive line. They're the group that everyone wants to know what's going to happen with them. Can they protect Ben Roethlisberger? Can they open up the run game? They did have a tough start against the Bills, but there were some things that Mike Tomlin liked. Joining me to talk about that will be ESPN's Brooke Pryor, as we were both in attendance during that. We'll also talk about how the Steelers are using the slot and what we saw with our first impression of the Steelers' next opponent, the Raiders, right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can catch this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and of course, YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our great content there. Joining me today is ESPN's Brooke Pryor and her dog, Hootie. What's up, Hootie? How you doing?
Hootie says, I'm really hungry and I would love to be fed or fight and be loud and disruptive. So instead, he gets to be in timeout next to me for this whole show.
Well, we appreciate you joining the show, Hootie. I don't know about Brooke, though. She's kind of whatever.
Listen, he has a really high fee to do these appearances, so we'll be looking for the check in the mail.
Oh man. Okay. Well, I gotta call Locked On about that one. But in all seriousness, we both were there for the Mike Tomlin Tuesday press conference. I felt like he was kind of open about how he felt about his offensive line. And the reason I wanted to open on the offensive line, I've talked about the defense the last two shows on Monday and Tuesday with the defensive front and the secondary. We'll get more to the secondary in just a bit here, Brooke. But I wanted to talk to you about just his impressions of the offensive line and our impressions of the offensive line because, two rookies starting in the offensive line. Kendrick Green at center, Dan Moore at left tackle, Kevin Dotson you had at left guard, Trey Turner was out there, and we got to see Chukwuma Okorafor at a familiar position. But it's kind of crazy when I was looking at it. I don't know if you agreed. Would you think that the one guy who was on in the same spot that he played for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, he in Chukwuma Okorafor, he might have been the worst one of the group in that game?
Yeah, I was looking at our stats on some of our advanced stat stuff, and it looked like Chooks was the lowest graded lineman. I haven't had a chance to look at the PFF grades, but just looking at the pass block win rate, that one always gets me. But looking at that, he had more losses than I think any other person on the offensive line, on the Steelers offensive line for Sunday. And that's just it's so hard to measure exactly how good each individual member of the line is because they don't have normal stats. But just looking at that and also the eye test, I mean, to me that seemed like one of the problem areas of the line. But on Monday we had to pick for ESPN our top rookie performer, and I sat there and I thought about it. And initially I went Presley Harvin, and I was like, actually he wasn't as consistent. Dan Moore, I thought, made a good case, but I ended up going with Kendrick Green looking at his stats. I mean, he played really, really well, but one thing that Mike Tomlin hit on that I also, to me, pushed him over the top were those intangibles.
Yes.
There was a clip that went on Twitter about him, like, playing through the whistle. He, like, essentially choke slammed somebody to the ground. I mean,
he really did. I saw that play. I was like, oh my.
It was very violent. And that's what we've heard Coach Clem talk about. That's what we've heard Mike Tomlin say he wants. That's what we've heard linemen say they want. And man, we really got it in a big dose on Sunday. And so even if the line wasn't necessarily as put together as this line has been in the past, as some of the other lines around the NFL, they're more veteran that have more cohesion. I think that the intangible thing that Mike Tomlin hit on today, saying that, hey, I liked the physicality. I liked the intangibles. I liked everything except maybe the skill level that still needs to develop. To me, that's not as big of an indictment as you might think it is when you say all these great things. Like, well, I mean, the skill wasn't actually that good. Like, I think what he was saying is that they have the foundation to be a good line. And to me, coming out of week one, you only give up 2 sacks. The run game wasn't great. It got better in the second half, but on the whole, I think they performed better than maybe we expected.
No, I agree with that. Like you said, Ben Roethlisberger was not under siege. There were times that he had pressure, but it wasn't like as a guy who grew up watching the Steelers, it wasn't like 2008 against the Eagles when it was just every play they were in the backfield just hitting them all the time. Tomlin's words on the offensive line were interesting. He said, "I love the spirit, the demeanor, and the physicality of which they worked, but the quality has to get better." He talked about the skill needing to get better, but he said, like you said, the will and intangible things that are very required are very encouraging. Those are things that I guess that you can harp on and say, you know what, his way of saying, listen, we needed to see if these guys were going to come out and be ready to do their jobs as best as they could, and they exceeded that part. Now it's just a part of we need to polish up the parts of your game that aren't that good right now, like
Mhm.
timing on when to hit their blocks. It's nice that Kendrick Green just choke slaying somebody. It was nice that Trey Turner pancaked Tremaine Edmonds out in space a couple plays. But you need guys to do things to win those battles at the right time together, and that's how the best offensive lines turn out to be that way. But another thing I thought that Tom brought up that was a very good point. There weren't a whole bunch of procedural penalties on an offensive line that was running a silent count with a rookie center. Like that was
Mhm.
he even said, I expected to be 1st and 15 a bunch of times in this game, and they never were. And I think that's very encouraging for what this offensive line needs to be this year.
That cracked me up more than any other moment in that press conference is when he was like, "Yeah, I mean, I thought we were gonna be in 1st and 15, but I was pleasantly surprised that we weren't." I was like, "Oh my god." So you're just like, "Yeah, I mean, I thought we might suck a little bit, but, like, we didn't suck as much as I thought we would." That made me laugh so hard that he was mentally preparing to have to accept some of these penalties. Mike Tomlin, who, I mean, like any NFL coach, hates penalties, but
Yeah,
in
he
the
does.
preseason, they would have penalties, and that would be the first thing he would talk about post game was being frustrated by some of these penalties. So the fact that it was just a good window into his mind. Like he might tell us that penalties are a non-negotiable. We can't have any, but actually there's a little bit of wiggle room there. Understanding the growing pains that we talked about a lot last week with Ben, with some of the other guys in the O line. I mean, it was kind of nice to hear like, okay, we're all on the same page here to expect some of these growing pains, and they certainly were there, but not in the way that Mike Tomlin thought they would be. So that's a sign of encouragement.
It is a sign of encouragement. The offensive line will continue to be a point of emphasis for this team to see how they perform. We will see how they do against the Raiders. We'll get to the Raiders in just a bit because Mike Tomlin talked a lot about what the Raiders could bring to the table. We'll talk about that in the third segment. I want to switch topics back to something about the secondary that he addressed that I wanted to talk about with Brooke, because we talked about this during mini camp back in June, just the way that the Steelers were using the slot position. There's a lot of interesting stuff to glean from there. But first, I got to tell our listeners about Bet Online. It's that time of the year again, and all eyes have now turned to football as teams are back on the gridiron, ready to start the football season. As always, Bet Online is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests, including the $500,000 NFL Mega Contest and the $200,000 NFL Survivor Contest, open right now at Bet Online. Head to the website and use your mobile device to sign up today and receive a 100% welcome bonus when you sign up. You know, when you get to sign up there, you also need to check out all of their bonus advantages. They have several different special contests that you can get in, some of which may even refund your wagers if you put up to about $25. But check all of those out at betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, whether it's football, basketball, boxing, all the way down to horse racing. Don't wait to take advantage of all of the great offers available for the 2021 season at betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of Locked On Steelers content. Here with Brooke Pryor of ESPN. Remember, you can check this show out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, and Odyssey. Rate us 5 stars with a positive comment on Apple. We get you shout at the end of the show. Brooke, one thing that you and I took note of back in minicamp, and again, they weren't even, the pads weren't on. It was hot in June. We were sitting in that Heinz Field press box just watching to see how the Steelers were going to do things. And we saw lots of rotation into the slot, whether it was Arthur Mollett or Cam Sutton or this guy or that guy. And we were wondering, like, how is this going to play out? Well, in this game, you saw Trey Norwood in the slot. You saw Minkah Fitzpatrick in the slot. You saw Arthur Mollett in the slot. I think you might have seen Cam Sutton in the slot. I think
Mhm.
they kind of moved him around a little bit, but they kept using different guys. And when we asked Mike Tomlin about this during his press conference, he said, we did that by design. He said, we have a level of respect for Josh Allen, and we had to mix up our calls and our utilization of people. When you have flexible guys like Sutton, Minka, and Norwood, it allows you to use complexities that hopefully keep the dogs off you. And that's an interesting way to put it. So you're talking about complexities because that does require a lot of communication when you're switching guys on and off. That's a lot of talking that has to happen. Not just to get the guys to the right spots, but then to know what your assignments are. But they did it against the number 2 offense in the league from last year, against a quarterback that I think many would consider a top 5 quarterback in the NFL right now, with receivers that are extremely talented, and they only gave up 1 touchdown. Brooke, did you feel like this was a repeatable plan that they put in place, or do you think this is something that they kind of did this week and they won't do too much of because it's kind of like playing with fire with using all these different guys?
Yeah, I mean, I get the sense, at least from what we saw in training camp and the preseason games, that this could be repeatable because it started in minicamp where we were seeing these rotations. Antoine Brooks was in the mix then.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of feel like they wanted to give somebody an opportunity to jump out as like, yep, this is our slot guy, this is our new Mike Hilton. But I mean, I've never seen a better case for Mike Hilton to get paid whatever he wants than they had to use 4 different guys
Yeah.
to fill his shoes on Sunday. And so I think that they're going to kind of continue to mix this up, knowing that they don't have an exact replacement, and Cam Sutton is too valuable on the outside to kick inside all the time. So instead, they're just going to do this patchwork thing that worked. I mean, it worked in some ways because Cole Beasley had a lot of drops, but it also worked because I think that the rotation did keep Josh Allen off balance. I liked what they did. I thought it was cool that Trey Norwood got the start. I'm sure that that wasn't Mike Tomlin being like, you know what, we should try to start 6 rookies today. Trey, it's you first. Um, I would like to believe that that's how it went down because I covered Trey at OU, and so it's awesome to see him now in the NFL being a late round pick as a guy that now gets to start week 1. But I don't think that he performed well enough to make a case to be the full-time slot guy. To me, the only guy that was convincing enough to be the full-time slot guy is Cam Sutton. But clearly, I mean, you would almost want a whole secondary of Cam Suttons
Right.
mixed in there with the Minka, with the Joe Hayden. If Cam Sutton could just clone himself a couple times, it'd be the perfect secondary. But that's not the case. So I think that maybe we won't see quite as much rotation. It didn't catch up to the Steelers. Like you said, the communication was really good on Sunday. I think they had 1 too many men on defense
Yeah.
call, and I didn't see who that extra person was that didn't get off the field. So I don't know if that was a secondary thing or if it was a different position, but I do think that we'll still see some type of rotation, just maybe not to that extreme where it felt like each quarter it was like almost like a preseason game. Like, okay, well, this guy's quarter is up. We got to bring in the next guy. I don't think it's going to be like that much going forward.
No, I agree with that. I think that they're going to find a more of a continuity with with a certain group of guys that they want to use. But one thing that also spoke out to me, something else that Tom addressed, when Aditi Kinkabwala asked him about the lack of blitzing, they only blitzed on 2 plays. They were just trusting 4 men, got 4 men, get after the quarterback. And that was part of Mike Hilton's role. He was often that 5th guy that would try to get in after the quarterback or go in and stuff the run or sniff out, if there's a running back trying to leak out of the backfield. They had none of that in this game. And that allowed them to say, hey, you know what? Let's play with Trey Norwood as a deep safety. Let's bring Minka down in the slot. Let's bump this guy over that way and try to confuse Josh Allen as much as possible. I think a big part of this is also building off of that pass rush that we saw dominate this game at defensive front, and Melvin Ingram being a 3rd presence that's not a Ola Adini, not a Cassius March. Him and Alex Highsmith combined with TJ Watt, those are 3 guys that they feel comfortable rotating in and out. And Devin Bush and Joe Schobert, 2 linebackers that they felt comfortable running the middle of the defense and flying all over the place to do what they needed to do. I think all of that kind of eases up the role that you need from a slot corner compared to last year, where you needed extra pressure, especially when Bud Dupree went down. You needed help in covering and stuffing the run because Devin Bush went down, and you didn't have really a run and hit type of guy like Devin Bush. And now you could say Joe Schobert a lot closer than that than a Vince Williams. I think part of this might just be the Steelers adapting to their new personnel and playing to their strengths, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny when you talked about, you could tell that they didn't have a Mike Hilton as like that extra guy that would come up and get some of those tackles in the backfield. That also reminded me that there wasn't a Vince Williams, and he was like a heat-seeking missile
He
at
was.
times last year. And I could see that, like, it felt like the Steelers were missing that, but also, like you said, they adapted to the personnel that they have. And I think that that was a great coaching job by Mike Tomlin and by Keith Butler to make those adjustments that, hey, just because we were Blitzburg in the past does not mean that we have to be Blitzburg now, kind of thing. Like, this defense can be good without that being the entire identity. And it clearly worked out well. Seeing TJ Watt out there doing his thing after just the insane week that he had, seeing Cam Hayward go out there after getting called old every other day, and recovering TJ Watt's strip sack. I mean, I think that this defense, I heard on, I think it was Get Up yesterday morning, talking about how, like, if they do this type of performance every single week, they'll be 17-0. Obviously, keeping that up is going to be really tough,
Yeah,
and
that's a
that's
tall
not
task.
factoring in injuries, right? I mean, there were, I think Rex Ryan threw out an 85 Bears comparison, which, like, whoa, guys, we need to pump the brakes. It's week one. This is great. However, there needs to be some consistency, and they need to replicate it a little bit more. But I do think that just this team, whether it's in adapting, the pass rush and the blitzing, or adapting the slot corner, shows that, it felt like the key word in the preseason was versatility. When you ask Tomlin or you ask Keith Butler about certain guys, the first thing that they would point to about why they're valuable is their versatility. And you see that in the way that they were rotating the slot, the way they rotated the outside linebackers, even not having Stephon Tuitt. I felt like they were able to move some guys around, bring in a guy like Chris Wormley. Tyson Alualu had a really good game. I just think that this defense has been really good so far, granted small sample size, at molding to the situation and not being so inflexible that they can't make up for an injury here or there. I mean, Robert Spillane going down in warmups, he's not, going to be as important as he was at times last year, but
Still, that's depth.
that's still a significant, right? That's a significant hit to the depth. So to me, those are, again, huge encouraging signs from this defense early on.
Certainly, and I do think that there's a concern factor for the Steelers when it comes to watching the injuries, because we've seen that over the years. This team has been hurt by injuries, but when it comes to embracing the challenges that are in front of them and using that versatility, having guys that can play multiple positions. Mike Tomlin said for years, if you can fill 2 depth chart spots for me, and where you normally someone would fill 1, you're going to be that much more valuable. And that's something that they feel like they have in a Cam Sutton, in it what looks like a Trey Norwood, and heck, in Minkah Fitzpatrick, who played in the slot a bunch in this game. So having that versatility is going to be a big part of this Steelers defense. We will see how much they keep that up, because like you're talking about here, like I'm talking about, it's great to do that for a week and even 2 or 3 weeks, but eventually, having to adapt week after week to this new offensive scheme you got to face, and this new offensive scheme you got to face, and their strengths and their weaknesses, and doing that and keeping up with all the different roles, that can come at you really quickly. And a Trey Norwood especially, who all the praises for this young man. He's impressed Danny Smith. He's impressed Mike Tomlin. He's impressed all the defensive coaches. Everyone likes to talk about how well he can communicate. It's going to be different when he's facing his 10th straight offense in 11 weeks, and he's going to have to keep up with all the scheme adjustments. That might not be as easy as people might think it is, but the early steps, they're getting it done. I think that's a big part of this story. One defense that might give them fits, though, is the Raiders. They were going after Lamar Jackson on Monday Night Football. We're going to talk about the Raiders, what Mike Tomlin said about it, and what Brooke thinks about the Raiders right after this break. But first, I got to tell you guys about DirecTV Stream. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, and then you're watching your sports highlights on your phone, and then you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way that you can get all the entertainment you love without the hassle. And it's a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream. And it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before. So you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. The best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. And content varied by package. We're also brought to you by Built Bar. If you want a healthy treat that tastes like a candy bar, Built Bar is the protein bar for you. It's the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team and comes in so many different flavors. Whether you want a fruity snack like raspberry, strawberry, or orange, or something different like salted caramel, cookies and cream, and Rocky Road, or my personal favorite, double chocolate, Built Bar has so many flavors to enjoy. And the best part, they're all healthy. They range from 130 to 180 calories. They pack 17 to 18 grams of protein, but only 4 to 5 grams of sugar and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. That's a tasty and healthy snack. They'll save you from eating the snack that you'll regret later and stay on task with anyone's diet. Order today and get your favorite flavor delivered right to your door by going to built.com and using promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED 15 LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Now, Brooke, I don't know if you know this, but on Locked On Steelers podcast, when we do back-to-back ad reads, we keep it rolling. So we're going to finish out right here with this segment here. I wanted to talk to you about the Raiders because what were your thoughts watching that game? Because my thoughts at the end were just like, please, just end it. I want to go to sleep. but I got to tell you, it was so much fun watching the back and forth, the what we thought was a touchdown in overtime, and then Derek Carr throwing the interception, and then the Ravens fumbling the ball, and then them coming out, and then the crazy ending of throwing just a floater to Zay Jones on a zero blitz. It was a wild finish, but I thought it was a gutsy finish from the Raiders.
Yeah, see, it's funny that you say you just really wanted to go to sleep, because I was way ahead of you, and halftime hit, and my husband took the dogs upstairs, and it's his fault because he turned off the big lights in our apartment. It's Teddy's fault. He put on one little light above the stairs, and I'm like, no, I'm going to be totally fine. This is a great game. When I tell you that I closed my eyes at halftime, and then the next time I opened them, the Raiders were celebrating what they thought was the game-winning touchdown, I was like, well, a lot of things have happened since halftime because all of a sudden this is overtime, and I sat up and I was like, when I saw that his knee hit the ground, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is crazy. This is going to be a great finish. Like, they're going to win it right here. And so I sat up and I had a pep talk with myself. And I was like, Self, this is a really good game. You will not fall asleep. You will see how this finishes because clearly you've been so invested the whole time. So I did see the interception. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm going to stay awake because the Ravens are definitely going to win it right here. And then I saw the fumble. And then I thought I saw the Raiders about to come out and try to kick a field goal, which I was just really confused. Okay, that did happen. That wasn't like a sleep delusion.
So here's what we found out after the fact. They couldn't find their kicker. It was reported that they just couldn't get him. And so they were like, well, so they took it to lay a game, so they couldn't pick it. Yeah, we don't know. Like I haven't seen if the story's been validated. If someone sees it, please comment on YouTube or tweet at us and let us know what happened. But I saw a report from Pro Football Talk that said, yeah, they couldn't find the man. And so then that's why they took a delay a game. And then eventually they're just like, all right, we'll try to get closer. And then they threw a floater to Zay Jones, and Marlon Humphrey was just so backed off that it was an easy touchdown. But that's again what made this game wild. It was just
I hope that people are watching this more on YouTube than listening to it in podcast form so that everyone can see my face processing all of this, because I nodded back off when I saw the field goal kicker go on because I was like, oh, well, it's just going to end a field goal and be over. I should have picked up my phone, put it on Hulu, and carried it upstairs and brushed my teeth and gone to bed. But instead I was like, why do that when I could sleep 15 more uncomfortable minutes on the couch? I had no idea that happened, and I've been thinking all day that was just like a sleep delusion that the kicker came out, because I thought, well, wait a minute, I've now seen the Zay Jones highlight 15 times, so there's no way they would have brought out the kicker, but then also Zay Jones won it. Like, that makes no sense to me. But with them coming here to play the Steelers this week, I am just so interested in these two teams meeting. Who's going to have the emotional letdown first? Because they're both going to happen, and who can fight back from it? Because the Steelers go in and beat the Bills in Buffalo in a game that nobody was picking them to win, and for good reason. You look at that matchup on paper, the Steelers were not supposed to win.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the Raiders-Ravens game, again, the Raiders weren't supposed to win, and not only are they not supposed to win, then they come back and win in this crazy overtime game. And they're coming off a short week. So that to me, that storyline is going to be so interesting. And I am very intrigued to see how the Steelers play Darren Waller. I thought what Mike Tomlin said today, that he looks more like Chase Claypool than any tight end on this roster, made just a ton of sense. And you looked this up beforehand, which is good, because I had it in my brain. The Steelers were not good at covering tight ends, but that was from a couple years ago. They were the second best at limiting receptions to a tight end last year.
They had the second fewest amount of passing yards allowed to tight ends, and they had the fewest allowed touchdowns to tight ends last year. And again, that was without Devin Bush for most of the season. They had it improved back in like the mid 2010s. It was a major problem. That's why they got Ryan Shazier. Eventually, when he became really good, it helped. But then when he got hurt, they kind of hindered. But when they got Minkah Fitzpatrick in 2019, along with Devin Bush, the two of them with Terrell Edmonds, they've had that presence in the middle of the field that has helped wipe out tight ends. I think Terrell Edmonds against Darren Waller is going to be a major matchup all game long on Sunday. And Mike Tomlin talked about it. He even said, the closest thing we have to him is a Chase Claypool. We don't have a tight end that's like a Darren Waller. And so that's a unique matchup problem the Steelers are going to have to find answers for, because Derek Carr loves to throw to some Darren Waller.
Yeah, it's honestly the biggest shocker of that ending is that Zay Jones scored the game-winning touchdown and not Darren Waller. That I'm interested to see is that matchup, and then also that defensive front that Tomlin just really complimented today. I mean, you come out of any Mike Tomlin Tuesday press conference and you're convinced that whoever the Steelers are playing is going to win the Super Bowl this year, right? Like they're like everybody. It could be like an 0-16 team. He's like, no, they're really good. They're going to win.
He names like 12 players that are just like superstar. I don't know why he's not in the Pro Bowl.
Right. I'm like, how did I not know about this guy? But I mean, the Max Crosby is someone who caught my eye early in that game. He was a wrecking ball. And I think that defensive front with him and Carl Nassib and Ngakoue, that's going to be really tough. I mean, if the O-line thought that they had a challenge last week, it just got leveled up this week. You cannot let Ben get sacked 1,500 times. I mean, it's not going to be that many anyway, because they won't play that many snaps. But, man, that's going to be tough. You need Najee to get a better run game going, but still, just that defensive front, I think, is going to cause some real problems. This week, obviously, they're going to be prepared because the Mike Tomlin team is never not prepared. But I'm excited. I'm really excited. And I'm excited that it's home, that it gets to be in Pittsburgh. Finally, we're going to have full fans in the stands. I'm going to have to set an alarm to leave 4 hours before the game, because I almost didn't make it to the Bills Stadium, because I way underestimated Bills Mafia. I'm not going to do that one again. But I think that this is going to be a really, really exciting game on Sunday.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of potential on both sides. The defense for the Raiders really showed up in a way I wasn't sure that they would. When they gave up that early rushing touchdown to whoever the Ravens guy is nowadays,
Tyson Williams.
Thank you.
Tyson Williams from Sumter, South Carolina. He went to UNC, transferred to South Carolina.
That's why you know him.
BYU. That's why I know.
No. You're a UNC person. I was like, wait, dang, Brooke's right on that. Oh, there's the connection. I see through you.
Don't tell people that. Just let them think that I have just in-depth knowledge of every running back in the NFL.
I was like,
whip that out.
I couldn't pull that out my butt for nothing. I was like,
You're welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because we were about to go through this whole show. It's like, but yeah, he scored that opening touchdown for the Ravens. I'm like, well, this is over because if he's scoring touchdowns, this is about to be a wrap. But the Raiders brought it back. They were bringing heat on Lamar Jackson. I will say, I kind of found it funny that Steelers fans took such joy in watching Alejandro Villanueva just continue to get whipped play after play.
Right.
But to me, it was also kind of like, I don't know about y'all, but Jakumo Okorafor didn't sell me on nothing much last week. So this might still be a problem this week. So maybe hold your horses. But this will be like you said, this will be a very interesting test. Ed Oliver, Jerry Hughes, Tremaine Edmonds, those guys were very tough and on the road using silent counts. That was a challenge. But you're coming up against this group, like you said, they got Ngakoue, they got Nassib, they got Crosby. They're going to be bringing the heat. Gruden likes to be aggressive. We will see this group get tested early and often in this game. But on the flip side, I think you could say the same thing for the Raiders offensive line. Alex Leatherwood, their rookie tackle that they got from Alabama. A lot of Steelers fans wanted him. He had some good moments. But he also had some rough moments in that game Monday night. And now the Steelers defensive front gets to go up against them. I think that's gonna be huge. Whose defensive line can exploit the offensive line better in this game for such a key matchup. Brooke, we got to run because we're way over time, but thank you so much for joining the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'll be with you there at Heinz Field Sunday covering the game. But let people know you can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
You can follow me on Twitter at BE Pryor, and all of my work is on ESPN.com under the NFL tab, and hit the Steelers button, and it's all right there all in one place.
Boom shakalaka. Do check out Brooke. She does amazing work there with ESPN. I'm Chris Carter. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques, as you see below. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button and the like button in this video. It really helps us out. Also, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Odyssey, thank you very much. Give us a 5-star review with a positive comment on Apple Podcasts, and you get a shout out at the end of the show. Thanks again for listening. We got Crossover Thursday tomorrow. It's Locked On Raiders host, your boy Q. If you've listened to the Locked On NFL podcast, you know me and Q, we go at it. It's going to be war tomorrow on the Crossover Thursday podcast. We'll see you then right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.